cremate me, like throw me somewhere, wherever you guys want, and just make sure, like, I'm always like, if I die really soon, just make sure that, it's okay if you want to get married again. If you want to date and get married, I want you to. It's like, okay, thanks. It's like, we don't really need to talk about this. You're not going to die.
I want to dance off, and if I can't have it, then I don't want it.
Yeah.
I want music, and I want all of you to twerk on your way out with
Wow.
me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do it.
Welcome to Beats Working, winning the game of events, where we share stories and strategies to turn any event or life moment into something unforgettable.
Events are wild, and the people who work in them are some of the most resilient humans on Earth. If you know, you know.
So come with us behind the curtain for a look at their most memorable experiences.
As they say, the show must go on, so let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Beats Working, winning the game of events. Today, we're flipping the script on the traditional view of funerals. I know this sounds crazy. I personally love them. In this Fun Table episode, we're diving deep into the rising trend of celebrations of life. Let's be clear, this has been rising for a long time. Wakes, celebrations of life. But we're going to get into it. Somber suits and quiet whispers are being swapped for storytelling, laughter, and even a little bit of dancing. I have my own story about that. Today, I've got my co-host Alysse and our very special Fun Table guests, Amy Liz Harrison, Dele Downs Kooley, and Kristin Graham. We're unpacking the power of saying goodbye in a way that truly honors a person's life, and maybe even throwing in a few surprises for your COL event. From theme memorials to legacy playlists, we are talking all about turning grief into gratitude and maybe even into a party. Welcome.
Hey
Hello.
everybody. Well, I can start off because, Libby is in charge of my celebration of life. So you guys, that is a party you're not going to want to miss, because we've been talking about it for a long time now, And hopefully it's not going to be for a while, to be clear, but
I'll probably be
that.
like 90 when this happens. So, I'm
dying at 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if you should trust my judgment at 90, but
Write it down. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
No, but what I think is awesome about celebrations of life is the people that come together to honor the person that has passed. And it isn't the stereotypical, maybe like 4 weddings and a funeral that we remember from the 80s and the 90s. It's, there's storytelling. There's so many pictures and videos. Like, I've seen people set up, whole tables of memorabilia. I was at one where there was a candy bar, and I immediately called Libby on my way home. I was like, add candy bar to the list. I'm going to need a candy bar.
It's in the note on my phone.
Yep.
That's on a boat.
Yep.
But it'll be back soon. Yeah.
Yep. Yes. Yes. So I think celebrations of life are really interesting. I do kind of wish that maybe we would have them before the person exited the earth.
Well,
there's
talk
that.
about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, Alysse, because I think that there is a movement for that, of people participating. And I know we were joking about here's the things I'd like, but I've seen several stories around people who participated if they knew that they were within a decline, or that they wouldn't have, that they were present for that. And I also have a wonderful friend called Andrea Dreesen, who has an incredible TEDx talk all about grace notes for the living, and about sharing your words and your stories and your memorabilia and candy bars while you have the chance, so that when you're sitting there on the other side, and they say funerals are for the living, right? Nothing was left unsaid or uneaten. And so I do think that there's a movement.
So recently I helped produce a musical concert in Seattle that had a lot of Seattle musical icons and legends performing. And it was at the Moore Theater. It was called Dreaming in Analog, and people got together. The premise of this concert was to honor Charles R. Cross, who was very well known in the Seattle music journalism communities. He had many, many top-selling books. And what I loved about this particular event was there in between songs, they would get up and they would, because he was a journalist for so many years, they would read pieces of his work in between songs. But one piece of his work that they read was his death letter. So it was his letter to his loved ones for after he was gone. And he had written it quite a while ago, actually. And as that was being read, I sat there, I got a little teary-eyed, and I was like, I need to write my own death letter. Right. And it doesn't mean that it has to be the final version. Maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I'm going to want to update it. Right. But just sitting there and listening to his thoughtfulness. Yes, of course, he acknowledged his son and some other close family members, but it was so powerful because it really made me feel like he was there with us. I've also been at celebrations of life where they've brought up a video of the person where they've been interviewed, and that can be very powerful as well. And I think that what we're going to see is, grief and mourning people that have lost, it's different now with social media because there's, depending on the person, there could be a lot of content there. I mean, there's enough content. I'll keep people entertained for decades, right? Decades. But it's interesting to see. And, even on Facebook, you can leave somebody in charge of your account when you're gone. I definitely want the person that I've left in charge to keep posting on my behalf, just for shits
to
and
freak
giggles.
people out.
Yeah, just for shits and giggles.
I think that we should just schedule them on Later or Metricool. We'll just schedule them on your account so that, every year it'll be just like, hey, remember this? And people are like, wait.
I love everything about this topic so far. And I have written letters to all my kids and to my husband, but I love the idea of a general letter as well to the people attending, or what you feel like you most would love to be remembered for. But here's my favorite thing about funerals. I know it sounds a little bit dark, but I love that people get together. For example, someone who shall remain nameless, may or may not be a family member, had a funeral when they passed, or we had one for this person. And we all went and we're like, gosh, is anyone going to show up? Because this person was a little prickly, okay? And not only did, yes, people showed up for this person, but they remembered anything that they could turn into a positive compliment. Where it could have gone south, everybody just kind of remembered that one time where they ran into that person and they made them feel a certain way, or this one, interaction brought out a new idea that led them down a different path. And I love that even at funerals, people can reframe situations and relationships and tend to be more forgiving and let things go. At least that's been my experience so far.
I love that you say that because I do think there are people in our lives that there are plenty of less than positive experiences that we could talk about. It's when they pass that you are more focused on what were their contributions, what did they leave behind, the celebration of life. And as we're talking about this, and so far what we've gotten to is what I think of as the very American version of, when we were talking about this episode, I immediately thought of the very boring, take them to the graveside service, the Ecclesiastics, the to every season turn. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that psalm read at a funeral. And growing up, those were, as a kid, there wasn't a lot to that. There wasn't anything exciting. Maybe after everybody came around, they were sad. They ate some cake. Maybe they talked about their memories. And then I was introduced to my Jamaican roots, where the celebration of life is very different. My grandmother, who was an oral historian and featured on the cover of a book, when she passed away, they have what they call a ninth night in Jamaican culture, where the body is buried after the ninth night of their passing. They believe that the soul departs from the body on the ninth night. And so everyone started coming to where the funeral was going to be. So for us, we were in the US, we went to Jamaica. There were people who walked as news spread from the outer parts of the island. They walked, they made their way. And on the 9th night, this was very foreign to me because I had not been a part of my Jamaican culture. I only heard about it from my relatives. So this was the first experience for me where on the day of, my sister had been cooking all day. That's something I love about celebrations of life is the food component. But she'd been cooking all day. They dropped my grandmother's body off and it sat in the yard where the service was going to happen. And then people just started showing up. And we had people from all over the island, people that had traveled, dignitaries came to this funeral. My father was a reggae musician. And so what I remember was the music, the drums, the people sitting up with the body and singing and sending her off to pass on to the next side. And then the very New Orleans style, the next day we had the service at the church and put her in a big tomb on the side of a mountain. But that very New Orleans style, the music, the singing. So there are so many different ways that we can celebrate life. And when we first started talking about this topic, I thought of the very sad sitting in the church, go to the grave, versus the real celebrations of life. Like when I hear When the Saints Go Marching In, I just get excited because it reminds me of my Aunt Lullam's funeral. And that was not sad. It was a hugely celebratory moment of the life that she had lived and the legacy that she had passed on to the rest of us.
I love the cultural elements of what you're saying, right? From
they have
culture. Yeah, or religious, like the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva. But one of the things in the last year, I've lost 2 friends suddenly. And I'm curious about whether you all have first thought about what the time after you pass might look like. And if so, have you shared that with anyone? Because having lost family members, there becomes this vernacular, well, they would have wanted. And I'm just curious if you all actually have given thought to what you might want, whether it's against your religion or your culture or individualized or exactly that. And then has that been shared in any way?
Well, I mean, I have Alysse's list on my phone.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
My husband and I, every so often will say, have we talked about what we should do if one of us dies? We're like, yeah, just cremate me, like throw me somewhere, wherever you guys want, and just make sure, like, I'm always like, if I die really soon, just make sure that, it's okay if you want to get married again. If you want to date and get married, I want you to. It's like, okay, thanks. Yeah. So
I want to dance off.
You're not going to die.
I want to dance off. And if I can't have it, then I don't want it.
Yeah.
I want music and I want all of you to twerk on your way out with me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do
Okay.
it. I think so. My dad had a couple of heart attacks when I was growing up. And so I always had this, I think all of us in my family had this kind of feeling like he could have another heart attack at any time. He could die at any time. And so I guess I can't really speak for my brother and my sister, or my mom, but I think because of that, I always I call my parents all the time. Like in college, called them every day. I think I called my dad one time at midnight to ask him the square footage of our house. I was clearly under the influence and a freshman. And my dad was like, don't do that again. That was funny now, but you don't need to call me middle night. Don't worry about that. And so when he did die when I was young, not from a heart attack, but he died from cancer, and he was diagnosed in July and died in November. So it was 4 months. It was very quick. And it was right after I graduated college. And I think because I had always lived with this fear that he was going to die early, I was very made sure I always said, I love you. Like I just had a very close relationship with them. And I think, I mean, I guess I'd have to ask my family if I do that now, but I think I'm similar with my kids and with TJ. So I don't know that they have directives specifically about what I want how I want my celebration of life to be. But I routinely talk about my dad's celebration of life. I call it his funeral party and I think that event is what really it really shifted my thinking of funerals from like an awkward, like uncomfortable, quiet event to something like to this mindset that it feels so good to have people in the same room who loved somebody that you loved, even a small amount, even if it's not quite the same, but they did love your person, dad, partner, whoever, in the same way. It just feels so good to see that and to feel that in a room. And I just tell them I want them to have like a really fun party and just for it to be good, because that it's lonely to lose somebody. And just knowing, even if it's card, if you can't go attend a celebration of life, like sending a message, sending a card, sending an Instagram, DM or something. It doesn't need to be a big display of support, but all of those kinds of things, I think, add up and really make the people who are losing somebody feel less alone in their grief and, how they're navigating that loss. So just have a fun party, guys.
Beautifully said.
And now it's on the record. So just save this episode, play it for TJ. If something should happen to me, let's have a good party.
Years ago, I went to a dinner where we talked about death. It was called Death Over Dinner, not the event that we produced a year ago with Sidekick Suppers, but this was the original one that I went to. And we had to go around this table, which was mostly strangers. I think I knew 2 people there, and talk about, how we wanted to go. And this one lady, Lillian, if you're listening, she wanted to be cremated and she wanted her ashes to be launched out of a potato gun in this very specific beach on the Oregon coast. And I remember thinking, I've got to get my act together. Like that is a cool, that's a cool way to go. Right. And I thought that was like just super interesting. And then when we had our Death Over Dinner event with Sidekick Suppers last year, my friend Rebecca was there and she said, Alysse, the most important thing you can do to prepare for your funeral is to have just all of your friends need to be younger than you. Just all of them. Just as many people younger than you, because that will assure that your celebration of life is very full and very crowded. Yeah. And, I have to tell you, on more than one occasion, I've often wondered, I wonder who will be there. I wonder how many people will be there. Will it be standing? Will it room only? Will they need to do a live stream? Will it be just Libby? These are things that I think people that you think of, right? You totally think of. And the other thing I don't have a lot of experience with death yet. I know I will by the end of my journey, but I do remember my grandma Bryson, when she passed, I was in my 20s. And, my grandma lived a very simple life. She was a single mom. When my dad was 5, my grandpa Bryson passed. And so she lived a very simple life. She lived in a single wide trailer in a trailer park in a very small town. And she was a little bit of a hoarder of knickknacks, which is where I get it. But she really didn't have very many luxury things or, she had a lot of thrifty things, but maybe not any luxury things. And I do remember being at her funeral and she had a baby pink Cadillac of caskets. It was the most beautiful baby pink. It was like almost like that bowling ball sparkle to it,
like not a real Cadillac, but just...
No, it wasn't a real Cadillac. It was like It was like the Cadillac of caskets, is what I'm saying. It was baby pink and it was glittery and it was silver and it was ornate. Wow. And I just remember thinking, why didn't she ever have anything that nice when she was alive? Like it just was so, it was so confusing to me that is where she put her money. And I was just like, no, that's not how I'm going to do it. And I do remember a couple years ago, Libby, when we went to Heidi Ng's funeral, who was a gal that we worked with at King 5 that died very unexpectedly and very much shook me to my core. It still does when I think about it. You know, she was known for many things, including sometimes being difficult. But one of the things she was known for was her shoe collection. She had a very wild shoe collection. And one thing I thought was really cool at her service is they brought several pairs of her shoes and they hung them inside of these empty frames along this wall so we could all admire like the 6 pairs of her craziest shoes or whatever. And I was just like, yeah, now this is more like it, right? That is, I want something more like that and less Cadillac of caskets. I do want to be cremated. Is that on the list, Libby? I do want to be cremated. I don't know about the potato gun launching thing.
Okay.
We can talk about that later. Yeah, we can talk about that later.
I want to go back to what Libby said about the loneliness. Like the grief is something that all of us share in some form or another over the course of our journeys, but it is a very lonely time. And so I love how Libby talked about sharing the words or the outreach. And so many people get fixated and I don't know what to say. And this is awkward. And being on the other side of it, just receiving anything, even an emoji, still, I see you. But I recently read an article, and I'm very curious in your thoughts on this, of how people are turning more and more to AI as their verbal companions or work partners, etc. And there is, and this shouldn't be a surprise at all, but there's a line of business where they're looking to recreate your loved ones. So you can upload emails, voice memos, videos, and that becomes a forum for you. And I'm
to like talk to, and it responds to, yeah.
It may be in their vernacular or their expressions, and it's interesting.
You know, I do have a thought about that because, back to me. After my dad died, they did he worked at a hospital in Pendleton. There's one hospital in this town. And they did a very small, before his funeral party, they did a very small, like, memorial service in the chapel at the hospital, this Catholic hospital, Franciscan. Anyway, it was just a couple of his like closest work people. There were maybe only like 25 of us, maybe 30 or 40. I don't know. It was very small, but they played a video it was on a DVD, but my dad was in charge of a lot of things, but one of them was nurse education. So they had all these videos of him doing like goofy or weird skits, like at these education days or like teaching. And there was, it was set to the song My Old Friend by Tim McGraw. If you haven't heard it, it's a real tearjerker of a song. So we're sitting there like, kind of like, crying silently. And then the music kind of went down and this part of the video came on and he was talking and I heard his voice and I just sobbed so loud because I didn't think I was ever going to hear his voice again. And I had never thought about that, like in your mind, you're like, oh, I'll remember it, but you're kind of lose a little bit of that every day, every year. And I was just so grateful to have that on. I still have the DVD in the little box around. I don't have a DVD player, but if I need to listen to it, I'll get one. But that was so, it was just like such a gift to have that. And so I actually do think voice memos, I don't know that I would want my dad, an AI dean, talking to me, but hearing the voice of the person that you love, who you will not be able to talk to again, just the sound of their voice. I think there's something very cool about that.
I save every voicemail that my people leave me. I know that we don't do that often, but on my phone, I save every voicemail my mom leaves me. She drives me nuts. She absolutely makes me insane. However, she is my mother, and I am very keenly aware of the fact that there will be a time when she is no longer walking around on this planet. So I don't take that for granted, and I save every crazy voicemail she leaves me because, like you said, I think I'm going to remember, but I won't. Like, there's this cadence to her voice that is my grandfather. And when I listen to her voicemails, I hear the cadence of my grandfather when he talked. It's something that all of his children have. And I love the idea of, I mean, that's the thing about AI or technology in general is it's a double-sided sword. On the one side, you get to go back and listen to the voice of your loved ones. And I don't just save my mom's voicemail. If you've ever left me a voicemail, I have one girlfriend that every time she calls me, she leaves a message. I don't always listen to them, but the fact that I know I can is a gift. So my phone and all the messages that are on it are the gift that I'm giving to my future self. The flip side of that, which goes with the loneliness epidemic, is there are times when we lean too heavily into AI as a companion. So I think it's like anything else, be a fan, not a fanatic of the technology that's being put out there. And there's always going to be a light side and a dark side.
What about you, Amy?
So, okay, this is a lovely, heartfelt tone that I don't want to wreck, but I do have a question for you guys. It's a little crazy. Has anyone planned a surprise for their funeral? What I mean by that is, like, at a really heartfelt moment, Rick rolling the entire audience, for example. Anybody have a surprise planned?
Okay, well, I do. But it started off as a joke. You have this, I think, Libby, on the list. It started off as a joke, but now I actually just think it should happen because of the number of events that Libby and I have produced. And, 98% of them had photo booths. I once joked that I wanted to have a photo booth at my celebration of life. But when you get out of the photo booth and they hand you the printed picture, surprise! Oh, yeah. I've been photoshopped in with you.
Alysse is like photoshopped in there. Yeah. That is on the list, I think.
That.
It's our last selfie together. Yeah? No?
Kind of like the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland when you go home with the
it's
ghost.
very Haunted Mansion.
Got it. I love it.
That's pretty good.
I want to choose the photo bombs, though. Like, the control freak in me is like, it has to be a good selfie if I'm going to do the photo.
Yeah.
We can have some photobomb options. Maybe you take your picture and then you go over to the photographer's computer and you get to pick which Alysse goes on your photo.
No, but there are things that I've thought about. Like, what about mannequins with like outfits that like people remember, like signature outfits that you wore that people are like, oh, I would love to see that jacket again or whatever. Like, there are so many things that you could do with the celebration of life event now that haven't been done, that I do think there is an opportunity there in a business vertical for an event company to really specialize. And Libby, we once joked about making celebration of life in a box, like a kit that you could order off the internet at different levels of investment. Like, because here's the thing, death is always going to be in business. Like, it's always, always going to be in business. And I do think that we're going to see over the next decade, I think we're going to see new and different things happening at Celebration of Lives that we haven't thought of before. One thing that I've thought about is my mom is a quilter and she has many, many, many beautiful quilts. And I would like to see whatever room we're in, whatever the space looks like, I want all of her quilts there to honor, and just to make it feel like her. And I think she would like that. I don't know. I'll have to ask her, So there's things like that I think we're going to see different twists.
I love that you bring that up because we're talking about celebration of life and celebrating life potentially before someone has passed. Well, that means that we have the chance to plan. So there are the things that I want to plan that are important to me. I think there are also the things that what is it that people loved about you? What was it? And that's why perhaps the celebration of life happening before you're gone is so important, because then you get to hear about the impact or what it is that someone appreciated about you? What difference did you make in their life? Whether it's the quilts, because I know with my grandparents, there were things about being around them that I still have a library desk and quilts that remind me of my grandparents. But what is it besides the physical possessions that bring joy to the lives of others? And I don't know how we capture that. That's a business opportunity somewhere. I also, one of my newest favorite things is in the world of podcasting. I have a friend who has started doing legacy podcasts where if you know you're going to pass, she facilitates your being able to capture that legacy that you want to pass on. And for me, that's really attractive because, like Amy, I have these life lessons that I want to share with my children that I've started capturing in my closet in my bedroom. I have a book, 50 Things That I Never Told You, and I keep it there as a reminder of what is it that I want to capture for my boy versus my girls. What are the things that I want to pass on? So I love the idea of a legacy podcast. And even just recently watched a movie where the mom sent her daughter on a scavenger hunt of sorts, and then would give her a DVD. So obviously it's dated, but she would get DVDs. And then her brothers were asking, what is it like? What do they look like? Because they wanted that same connection to their mom. So I think there are lots of future business opportunities out there for how do we celebrate and capture all of those beautiful things.
What do you think, Kristin?
I love all these topics, and we're talking about celebrating the life that we have lived. One nudge for all of us as a thought as we go away is, because that's about the experience the other people will have. Because there's one thing that every single human has in common with another. It's your birth and your death. We all have those. And we're talking about our celebration of our life, but how are we celebrating while we're alive? Whether it's our birthday or other things, how are we taking the time to celebrate our life while we're in it? And you've given me so much to think about today. And I love the idea of celebrating while we're all still here to be part of it.
I think that's a really great point, Kristin. And I think that brings us full circle back to why events and connection are so important. And it sounds like we will be having more conversations on this topic. And maybe you, our listeners, you have thoughts, please send us an email or slide into our DMs. We would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. You can email us at info@beatsworking.show. And remember, every detail matters. Every moment counts. And no matter what, the show must go on.
Thanks for listening to Beats Working, Winning the Game of Events, where we explore what it takes to make moments unforgettable. If you're leaving with a little more inspiration, a little more perspective, and a big side ache from all of the laughing at our funny jokes, then we've done our job. Beats Working is a Work P2P production. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platforms. Your support helps us keep the magic going.